with his operation that he engaged with the Navy to secure a safe landing of the U.S. Navy on Sicily during World War II. He was released from prison in 1946 through the efforts of Cardinal Spellman. So we have the Cardinal of New York with enough power to have the U.S. government pardon Luciano and send him back to Rome, back to Italy. So we have Luciano, the mafia, the most powerful mafioso at the time, the bosom friend of the Archbishop of New York. We have a tie between Frank Costello and Joe Kennedy. Frank Costello later became the chief mafioso of New York. He and Joe Kennedy were close. And then after Costello, they attempted his life when Vito Genovese came back to power in New York. Vito Genovese, while he was a fugitive and a fugitive from justice in the United States, he was the right-hand man of Benito Mussolini, and Mussolini's confessor was a Jesuit, priest Venturi. So we have Mussolini, a fascist, with the Jesuits, and Genovese, all bosom friends. So we have the connection between the mafia and the Jesuits and the Archbishop of New York.
And when Joe Kennedy lost out, then we all know what happened with that family, where the direction that they went.
With Joe Kennedy?
You said Costello and Kennedy were in contention for leadership.
No. Costello was in contention with Genovese for leadership.
Oh, okay.
And when Vito Genovese came back and put a hit on Costello, Costello was shot in the head, he was grazed, he resigned, and then Genovese took over. And so my point is that the Archbishop of New York controls the Mafia Commission. That means he controls all the pornography in this country. He controls all white slavery in this country. And there was a man by the name of Jeremiah Crowley who was an Irish priest who got saved, came to know the Lord, and he wrote a book called The Pope, the Chief of White Slavery, High Priest of Intrigue. It's nearly impossible to find that book. I have a copy of it. And in that he describes the organized prostitution that the Vatican controlled in this country, which later was given over entirely to the Mafia.
Okay, so what you have had to say is pretty heavy and pretty far out there. And I'm sure there's a lot of people headed for other channels right now. However, I think all of this has to be said, and I think that anybody out there that if this is of a concern to you, if you think this is, I mean, if there's even the smallest chance that this is all true, and I'm not saying it's not, you have to find out for yourself. I mean, I don't know why people will think, I don't like that, so I'm not going to deal with it or believe it.
Well, one way to find out is to read this book, Vatican Assassins, Wounded in the House of My Friends. I have an embossed seal of the Jesuit order that you can find on the internet. And then on the back, I have Kennedy here. And then I describe the assassins for the Black Pope, all these Knights of Malta that I name. I name J. Peter Grace of the Grace Commission under Ronald Reagan. I name Henry Luce. I name William F. Buckley, Jr., who still lives. I name John McCone, who was the head of the CIA at the time of the Kennedy assassination. I name William Casey, who was later the head of the CIA, and I have a picture with Casey with the Jesuits at Fordham in my book, Fordham being a Jesuit university in New York. I have a picture of James Angleton, who was chief of counterintelligence, worked with the Mossad and the KGB in the person of Kim Philby. I name Lee Iacocca, who was involved in the Kennedy assassination. He still lives. He dispatched his security chief, Carl Renas, to drive the limousine from Washington to Cincinnati to have all the evidence of primary strikes removed. I name the Dallas Bishop Thomas Gorman, who was also Knight of Malta, and this Thomas Gorman controlled the Dallas PD and the mayor. Mr. Cabell, who was the brother of Charles Cabell, who was the second in command of the CIA, who was relieved of command by Kennedy after the Bay of Pigs fiasco. So I name all these Knights of Malta that were in high places of authority at the time of the Kennedy assassination, and then I tell of Kennedy and Spellman and Nixon. So I think you will find it very interesting. It's 8.5 by 11. The book is written for World War II veterans. It's in very large type, so you can read it easily. Lots of pictures, over 130 pictures. And you will see how you were used in World War II, that World War I and everything between World War I and World War II, I call it the Second 30 Years' War, from 1914 to 1945 was a crusade. It was a crusade of the Pope, financed to increase his temporal power in Europe and throughout the world, and also to establish the Zionist nation of Israel. And Zionism is controlled by the Jesuit general, and for the purpose of taking the Dome of the Rock, blowing it up, and rebuilding Solomon's temple for the Pope.
Well, so the only real war that this country has had would be, well, actually two that's coming to me, the Revolutionary War and the Civil War.
That's right.
Those were wars.
Those were true wars. They fought with the intention to win on the side of Washington. And remember, without the great state of Virginia and with the help of France, we would have never gotten our freedom. And then the war between the states, it's not really a civil war, it's a war between the states, two sovereign nations, Confederate States and South.
It was referred to as a civil war.
It's referred to as that.
Right.
And the southern people were fighting for their independence to have their own way of life.
Right. The constitutional way of life.
Constitutional way of life. And the North said, you can't secede, you can't leave this union.
Right. Because it was at that time that they were trying to institute the changes in constitutional government.
Right. There's a book written called The Foreign Conspiracy Against the Liberties of the United States, written by the great Samuel Morse, the founder of Morse Code. He wrote and published that in 1835, and he tells of a Jesuit conspiracy with Prince Metternich and the secret Treaty of Verona to overthrow our Constitution, to overthrow the liberties of American citizens. And so that was already in the making, and he exposed it. The first was the tariff issue. The second issue became the slavery issue. And they divided the country unconstitutionally in 1850 with the Missouri Compromise. That was a criminal act. Should have never been done.
Okay, one last thing. We're running out of time. To go back to this United States citizen, this 14th Amendment citizen that was created, how do you get around that, or can you get around it? Can you become a sovereign citizen?
I don't use the term sovereign citizen. I did it 12 years ago. Excuse me, when I understood this issue, I filed a unilateral contract under seal called a release. And you file your release in your county courthouse, and what you do is you abandon your privileges and immunities of 14th Amendment U.S. citizenship because you have the right under the law of contracts to abandon property. Once you abandon those privileges and immunities of U.S. citizenship created under the 14th Amendment, according to the law of contracts, particularly Williston on contracts, you revert back to your former status.
Okay.
When you revert back to your former status, you are now a citizen of the sovereign state of Nevada, and thereby a citizen of the United States. And the privileges and immunities of your citizenship of the sovereign nation state of Nevada include the Bill of Rights. That's the way it should be.
But it's effective. But you can't walk into court and say, I'm a citizen of the state of Nevada.
Well, you have to do your best, and you have to present your release there because it's stamped, it's under seal. You file it in the Recorder of Deeds office. It has to be filed with a third party. And you just get your certified copy and you present it in court and you show the judge, I've abandoned these privileges and immunities of 14th Amendment citizenship, and I'm no longer, therefore, subject to the jurisdiction, the in personam jurisdiction of this court, as evidenced by these flags.
Yeah, but then we're running out of time. Then you get the giggles from the judge. I've seen them.
Nonetheless, what you've done is
contempt of court.
Nonetheless, what you've done is the right thing.
Eric, it's been a pleasure. They're making gestures at us. We have to go away. Thank you very much for coming all the way from Pennsylvania to share your knowledge with us. Everybody, find out what Eric has to say. Don't believe Eric, don't believe me. Go find out for yourself. We'll help you.